Hi, welcome to Cockeyed and Curious. Today I'm going to be talking about My City. It's a polynomial game with Tetris-like pieces where you play actually a series of 24 games with your final score being the accumulated points that you've gained throughout winning those games, as well as side means to accumulate points. It's a lot of fun. Each individual game takes about 20 minutes and they're thematically tied in sets of 3 episodes at a pace. So you complete 3 episodes and there's actually an envelope in the box for the next 3 episodes that explains the new rules. And that's one of the interesting things about the game, is that every game you're tweaking the rules a little bit. There's new scoring conditions, some drop off, some get added. There's little variants in where you can place pieces, whether or not you can pass on a piece, and so on. So what's great about this is it's sort of like a Groundhog Day experience where you keep doing the same thing over and over again, but it's not the hell that those type of movies or that scenario, that story provides, because there's enough of a tweak and you're making progress, there's changes. And they're short. It's not like you're doing the same thing for hours at a time. As already mentioned, each of the individual episodes is about 20 minutes, which makes it a pretty straightforward, easy experience. So in a given game, what you do is thematically the same. You have a set of pieces, they're different Tetris-like shapes of different colors, and you have a deck of cards with a unique shape and color on each of the cards, and you're just going to blow through the deck. You flip a card, that's the next piece you place. Now the thing about placing pieces is that oftentimes there's one place on the board or an area of the board where you have to place your initial piece. But then after that, every piece you add needs to be contiguous with some shape that you already have on the board. So each piece that you place later in the game has to just be connected somewhere to the contiguous mass that you've produced on your game board. There's a few little other nuances, like there's certain places you can't place a piece over, and there's a river across the middle where you cannot place any given piece across, though you can place a piece so it's connected on one side and then put another piece next to it over the other side of the river. But you can't actually have a piece go across the river. The rules do change from game to game, but generally you do want to keep light colors together, though there's often some kind of perverse incentive where you're trying to race from one side of the board to another, perhaps with one contiguous color, perhaps not. And there's just oftentimes different scoring mechanisms that actually conflict a little bit. And this happens even early in the game. I remember one of our first games just pausing and kind of just staring and just thinking, like marveling at how complex this really simple choice was. You have a discrete universe of pieces, and you know that at some point every one of those pieces is going to become available, and once it becomes available you're never going to see that specific piece again. So you can plan ahead a little bit. You know what you would like to do, and it's just whether or not the timing allows you to put the piece where you want to put it at that given time. And most of the time, this isn't the case for all 24 episodes, but you can generally pass on a given piece, meaning you'll never play it, you take a small point hit, and then you just keep playing. So this isn't a game that necessarily leads to analysis paralysis. There's only so many options on a given move, but there are quite a bit of options at the same time. So there's nuances in terms of the play. But given that you can plan ahead of time, and you can know, like, I want to save this piece for this spot, this piece for this spot, and so on, it does make it so you can move a little bit faster. There were not many moments where we were truly waiting on each other. I think once or twice in a game when a piece came out that you really didn't want to see, you kind of just stared down this introspective nightmare and eventually just relented and said, okay, well there went that plan, and then you accept a new course of action. But then at that point you have some at least inkling of where you're going to put various other pieces, so again you set them aside in your mind and wait for them to come up so you can place them in the right spot. So it tends to flow quickly. I think most of the games did take about 20 minutes. What's great about the legacy component, and that you're playing over 24 different games, is that you can get completely romped in one game, and your final score isn't based on a differential. It's not like you got 20 points, and then you got 30 points, and then you got 15 points, and you just add those all up, and that's your final score. No, whoever wins an individual game gets a couple marks that you tally elsewhere on the board, and the winner generally gets 2 points, and then if you're playing a 2-player game, the loser gets no points. But then there's these side mechanisms where if you're the first to do something, or you achieve some other set of criteria, then you can actually get these end of series marks as well. So your strategy isn't necessarily that of course you want to win every game, but if you know you're not going to win, there's other ways to make sure you're getting the points that you need for the final conclusion of the game. What's also great is that you might be playing with someone who's just naturally a little bit better at this type of game than you are, But whoever wins a given game, they'll receive this minor little setback in the form of a sticker that you put on the board that makes it a little bit harder in various ways for them to win the next game. And then conversely, whoever loses the game gets a sticker that makes things a little bit better. And so just one very simple example of this, which isn't really spoiling anything because you see this right away at the beginning of the game, is that there's these rocks, and at the end of the game you don't cover up rocks, you lose points. Conversely, there's trees. If you cover the trees, that's fine, but if you don't cover the trees, you get bonus points. And so someone may end up with more rocks on their board as compared to the loser who ends up gaining a few extra trees. So through this balancing mechanism, you can keep the games much tighter across the series than they might have been if one person is just naturally is a little bit better at this sort of game and just tended to win more of the games. And across the series of the 24 games, there's of course this theme. There's certain integral rules that pretty much stay cemented throughout each of the games, but there ends up being these kind of one-off ways you can get points, and that does ebb and flow in terms of what those mechanisms are, to the point that there's alternate pieces that you bring into the universe, and then some of those pieces actually drop away later. And some of the core rules, by the time you get to the end of the game, are very different than what the core rules were at the beginning, outside, of course, of the flipping a card to see which piece you place next. And so one of like the awesome things about the experience that we had, and I hope this is common for many people, is that we were sort of neck and neck. Sometimes Kelly would sweep a series of 3, sometimes I would sweep, sometimes we would trade off every other game. And in looking at the overarching log of our points, we were always within a few of these little tick marks. Within, I think maybe at most someone had a runaway of about 4 tick marks at some point or another, but then the other person would catch up. It came to the point that after 24 of these episodes, we had the exact same number of points and it came down to a tiebreaker. And the rulebook actually recognizes that tiebreakers are possible because there's, I think, a series of nested conditions. And Kelly won on the first of those tiebreaker conditions. So in that regard, the rules did envision an even tighter game than we had, so maybe you could argue she blew me out even though we had the same score. But regardless, like, that was just magical. It wasn't like you play like 5 of these games and you just crush because you have 0 points and the other person has 10 or 20 or whatever the case may be. And you're just like, there's no way I'm going to win. Now I have to play another 15 of these games. Sucks. Let's just do something else. I'm done with board games. Like, that never happens. I will say that the first time I told Kelly that she needed to, record her score through marking out these little pips on the board with a pen, she just looked at me like that seemed indelible, tragic. It's like writing in a book for some of those people that don't take notes in books. And I had to convince her, no, this is okay. This is the way the game's set up. We're not ruining anything. You're not going to hell for this. Like, it's going to be okay. And amusingly enough, I don't know if it's because the sticker somehow feels a little less permanent because it's just glue, though it's not like you could really tear the sticker off because you would precisely do that. You'd probably tear some of the backing on the board off, and the sticker itself probably would never be usable again. But something about that, I think it worked out a little bit better for her. Like, it didn't feel as wrong. And so maybe that was like a training step to feel better about putting the pen to the board. The other thing I think that made it a little bit easier to accept that we would be basically permanently ruining the boards so you couldn't play this game in the future is that on the back side of each board there's actually a steady state version of the game space. It takes a set of rules kind of midway through the game, has those mechanics in place, and you don't actually ever write on or sticker that side. It lets you play as many one-off experiences as you like. And I don't know that we'll necessarily do that or not, because the game supports up to 4 players and there were just 2 of us. We can actually do the legacy experience one more time. And I don't think it's something I'm clamoring for to do in the near term, but I do think that a year down the line or at some point we'll pull it out. And it'll be interesting because it'll be kind of like revisiting literature or a movie, because we'll have new appreciations and new understandings about what we're doing that we didn't have the first time. Because at some point you had a little strategy of where you're putting a sticker for a given reason, but now if you know down the line you're also going to get these other stickers and need to have these other scoring techniques that maybe you don't want to put the sticker where it may be seen most advantageous for this next game, but it might prove to be more advantageous for many games down the line. And I don't know, maybe the game's not that deep in the end of it, but I do want to see to what extent the knowledge of what is to come will influence our decisions that we're making in that particular moment. I do recommend My City. I think it's a great experience. It might be best for couples. Again, I only played it as a 2-player game. I don't know what it would be like with 3 or 4 players, But I do like that because you do want to play with the same people, and it's good to play it somewhat in a close period of time. Like if you stretch this out over a year, I feel like it'd be a different experience than if you could play all 24 in a couple weeks or a month. I think that probably does make for a better experience overall. It rates the game on various metrics, and one of them is urban planning, and it gives it 5 out of 5 pips for that. So that's pretty amazing. If you're looking for urban planning, this is your go-to.